what has happened in the last 2 or 3 days, and the new confrontation between Iran and the United States, the attacks, the, we had, the night, it was last night and then the night before. It is the new, because of the escalation, because of the blockade that is happening in the Persian Gulf. The United States was attacking the oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. Then Iran responded to that, to Kuwait and Bahrain, which finally the international airport in Kuwait was hit by something. They say it was Iranian drone. Then some footages show maybe one of these, interceptors of Patriot system failed to do, to hit the target. They get back and hit the airport. But after all, the airport was hit, and we know what they're doing with the airport, the international airport in Kuwait. They're sending a lot of weapons there to Kuwait and using the airport. They're sending weapons, everything there. And so there were some tankers in the Persian Gulf being hit by Iranian missiles and drones. This is the current phase of the war. What has happened recently, and it's so much bold, in my opinion, is the attitude of the Iranian government. Because looking at for example, General Keen, who's every time you open up, you see some video of Fox News on YouTube, he's talking about the war, how the United States can continue this war. He's trying, what they're trying to do is that they're trying to say the head of IRGC is different from the head of parliament, for example, or the president of Iran, because they want to negotiate, but IRGC doesn't want to negotiate. That's why they're attacking us in the Persian Gulf. This is totally, looking at what Iran is talking about, it's totally different from the Iranian scenario. They're telling us that the United States is attacking us. That's why we're responding. And how do you see the situation in the Middle East as time goes by? Donald Trump he doesn't want this war. He knows that this is a losing war. And as time goes by, it's going to get worse. What is your understanding of that?
Well, as I read the situation, the side that has infinitely more credibility in this conflict is the Iranian side, because generally they do what they say they were going to do. Their positions don't change 3 times a day. And this idea that Iran is somehow torn between the really, really fanatical, intransigent IRGC side and the reasonable civil government which wants to negotiate with the United States, that's, I think, their own self-serving fantasy, which they invented just to say that, oh yeah, we're negotiating, everything's going great, but there's these IRGC fanatics that need to be somehow sidelined. I think that the truth is that there's a lot more divergence in approaches on the Western side, because you have, and I don't know where Trump stands in this, but you have part of the government that understands that this is a losing war, which they should have understood before they ever started it. Everybody knew this. And then there's what I would say is the Anglo-Zionist conspiracy that wants to end Iran, that wants to regime change the country and take political control, because it's the obstacle to Western empire's hegemony in Western Asia. And it's also an obstacle to them taking possession of Iranian wealth. Iran is the 5th wealthiest country in terms of natural resources. It has a very large population, very highly educated population, and you could that there's a lot to loot there. So the conflict is in the West. Iran is fighting an existential battle. There's no conflict. There's unity, and so I think that as Iran has understood that it holds the dominant power in the region. I think that they now want to end the past 120 years of harassment by Western colonialists, and they want to evict Western military resources from the region and design a completely new security architecture, which is consistent with what their partners, Russia and China, want to achieve as well, and to start a new Eurasian century, a multipolar global order where countries are going to be cooperating and trading together in peace, rather than this constant, non-stop, never-ending wars that are generally instigated by Israel and by the American side. But we have to never forget the British side, because they are always there in the equation. I don't know why they get a pass that nobody looks at them, nobody talks about them, but they're very, very deeply involved, and they're usually involved in more pernicious ways than the United States. The United States has a very visible role, because they get into the action when it's time to apply brute force and start dropping bombs. But the British are in there usually years ahead, through their secret diplomacy, intelligence networks, non-government organizations, charitable organizations, banking institutions, casinos, and so forth. So they're always there, and then the United States comes in, usually as a dumb giant with only limited understanding of the area, when it's time to bring the aircraft carrier strike groups and dropping bombs and launching missiles. And I think that Iran has now seen the opportunity to completely end this regime. And this could be a generational opportunity, once in a lifetime chance to create a completely new future for the region. I think that maybe many people outside of Iran in the region have understood this as well. So you're having wobbly cooperation between even the Gulf Cooperation Council members with the United States and NATO. Maybe the exception here is UAE, but what is UAE? It's a feudal kingdom. It's a fiefdom without a real army, without a real force. Other than money, they have nothing. So they're very likely to not survive this conflict. And I think that Israel is also very likely not to survive this conflict.
What has happened so far, Alex, militarily and economically in the United States? You remember before this war started, the United States, Donald Trump said, we are independent. We don't need the oil coming from other countries. But that's not the reality in the United States, because the oil they have is some sort of light oil, which is not good to produce diesel, for example. The other point is, since the war started, Donald Trump has to release some of those reserves of oil that they had in the United States to balance the market. So he's using that while the war is going on. And one of the main reasons that he decided to lift the sanctions on Russian oil and Iranian oil was the same problem, that they need to receive oil from outside. It's not that the United States is totally independent from the outside world. So they're dependent. They have to use that. They have to use the reserves. On the other hand, what has happened during the war with the intensity of these attacks on Iran? They have used a lot of the stockpile of the missiles, interceptors all together. So they have to replace them. Donald Trump went to China to make a new deal, to talk with Chinese. It seems that the outcome was not positive in the eyes of the Trump administration. That's why Marco Rubio said that we are 90% dependent on these rare earth minerals coming from China. We have to diversify the market. He went to Armenia to make a new deal with the minerals, but Armenia is not capable of providing the United States the way China is. This is the problem that they're facing. On one hand, economically, militarily, and internally with the midterm elections. Donald Trump knows if he loses that, he's going to be impeached. Maybe he's going to be removed from power. You see that desperation in the way that Iran tried to do something with Israel, because Israel announced that they want to attack Dahi in Lebanon. Then Iran put pressure on Donald Trump. Donald Trump called Benjamin Netanyahu and said, "You don't do that." And just last night we've learned that there is a new agreement between the government in Lebanon and Israel. But before going there to the case of Hezbollah, Donald Trump right now, economically, militarily, if he decides to continue the war, he has the shortages. How many days, how many weeks he can continue the war with the intensity we've seen during the 40 days of war? Oh, it's going to be for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Then the day after that, are they prepared? Because it's going to be completely depleted, the stockpile. And the economy is not doing, the global economy is under tremendous pressure because of the Strait of Hormuz. How do you see all these factors coming together and putting pressure on Donald Trump himself?
Well, starting with oil, Nima, it's not just a question of the quality of oil that the United States produces versus what they get from Venezuela, let's say, because in the United States, now the bulk of production is fracking out of fracking wells, and that's very light oil. It's good for producing gasoline, but it gains you no diesel fuel and no jet fuel for aircraft. So that's a problem. But then at the same time, there's also the issues of oil price. So if right now, let's say ballpark, about 10% of global oil supply has been removed from the markets, which is the biggest disruption ever in the whole history of oil markets. And I don't think that it's been yet fully discounted in oil markets. Because even in 2022, oil price was $120. And in 2008, oil price was $140. So we're now hovering around 100 Brent crude oil. That's not particularly high. We might be looking at much higher prices in the oil markets. But then, if the war escalates, we already know that, one of the target areas that the United States and Israel have designated in Iran is Iran's energy infrastructure. And the Iranians have said that if they do that, Iran is going to destroy the energy infrastructure in the whole region. And that could remove an additional 22% of crude oil from the global markets. Where does the crude oil price go then? It could go to $200, $300, $500 a barrel. And I'm not necessarily pulling figures out of my hat. It's already in 2012, British Ministry of Defense was projecting that oil prices, due to global instabilities, could go to $500 a barrel. That's their estimate. So let's say that that's possible. It may be unthinkable where we're standing now, but this could get very ugly in the coming months. And so this is a problem, because if the United States economy suddenly finds itself with $10 a gallon at the gas pumps, there's going to be very heavy political consequences for Trump to deal with. Who knows what might happen? So that's part of the problem. Another part of the problem, as you said, Nima, the logistics of this conflict are not particularly favorable to the United States or to Israel. They're running out of munitions. Their munitions cost a lot of money. Production of new bombs and missiles is very, very restricted, whereas Iran is very effectively using their missiles and these very cheap drones that they produce by the thousands. So Iran has a very, very clear escalatory dominance. And now there's a rumor that they might even have a nuclear bomb. So, uh, there's no good option for them. And I said before this war ever even started, I said that the only winning move for Trump is to throw Israel under the bus and to make a, a deal, an arrangement with Iran, which apparently was already they were already discussing future business deals, investment, trading, cooperation, all these things. Consistent with the multipolar global order, which at least before February 28th, the Trump administration was insisting that that's what they're embracing uh, for the future of the United States. Now everything seems to have been turned up on its head, and I don't understand where Trump is standing, because he's just flip flopping from one position to the next. But I can't help noticing that the American approach has radically changed um, in the late 2025. And that coincides with Jared Kushner appearing on the scene, again, coming out of nowhere with no official portfolio in the Trump cabinet. But suddenly he's in charge of the most delicate negotiations with the Russians, with the Iranians. And we have to remember who Jared Kushner is. Jared Kushner is a devout Zionist, very close family friends with Benjamin Netanyahu going back decades. And Jared Kushner, as he himself revealed it just the other day, is also very close friend with Nathan Rothschild, which kind of goes back to the idea that all roads lead back to London, because the Rothschild banking family is the heart of the city of London, and they're involved in all these conspiracies that keep war. Wherever human blood is running in rivers, this same family name always turns up. They were also the employers of Jeffrey Epstein. So it all kind of starts to show the outlines of an ugly Zionist conspiracy that now seems to be in charge of events. And I don't see Trump as how do you call it, as an outsider to this conspiracy, because his son-in-law and his daughter are at the heart of it. They're important players in all this. And so this story about how Trump had this really tough call with Benjamin Netanyahu and then used expletives and yelled at him and so forth, I suspect that that's a just theater for public consumption. I think that Netanyahu held off on his plan to attack Beirut because the Iranians immediately said, we're going to attack northern Israel, and they warned all residents, all the settlers in the north of Israel, to evacuate because something really heavy was coming their way. I think that's why Benjamin Netanyahu relented, not because Trump yelled at him.
Yeah. Alex, I think, where do you see Israel today? Because before this war started, many people in the United States, in the establishment, for neocons, were arguing that Israel is the strongest country in the Middle East before the war started. They thought that the acts of resistance was defeated. There is no Assad in Syria, Lebanon. They have, decapitation of the Said Hassan Nasrallah and his commanders, decapitation of, some leaders in Iran. So we had the case of the Red Sea, somehow in some sort of deal between the United States and Yemenis. Israel is is the greatest and the most powerful country in the Middle East. What is Israel today as an outcome of the war they Netanyahu wanted for such a long time? How do you see Israel today compared to what it was before?
I think Israel is radically weak now. I mean, they're fighting wars on 5 fronts or 6 fronts. I can't even keep count. Uh, their pursuit, they have no strategy. There's no strategy to their wars. So the attack on Iran was, I believe, it was just a gamble because they developed resources on the ground in Iran. They counted on Iran being weak internally, that through bombing from the outside and an insurrection on the inside, that they would be able to overthrow the regime. They already started cultivating the Shah Reza Pahlavi to again install the kingdom, but it was meant to be over in just a few days. The regime, Iranian government, was supposed to fall in just a few days. That didn't happen. Not only that, the nation kind of united around the government, and as far as I can see, most people in Iran support their government, and they understand what they're up against. So they are determined to win. It's existential to them. Israel's society is falling apart. Their economy is falling apart. They are completely dependent on Western support economically and militarily, but they are losing Western support rapidly, obviously because of their behavior. And so Israel doesn't have a future. And then their most fanatical segment of their political class is dead set at expanding the wars to fight Turkey and to fight Egypt. And then we've also heard how they then plan to go against Pakistan as well. It seems to me that war has become part of Israel's DNA. They cannot exist. I mean, their whole function is to keep the region destabilized, and they depend on war. They cannot have peace. It was not so long ago in 2024 that the whole Arab community in their neighborhood, supported by other Muslim countries around the world, collectively offered peace to Israel. They said, "We will normalize with you. We will. All you have to do is just allow Palestinians to have their own state, and we'll normalize with you. You will become a normal member of the community of nations around the world. We will guarantee your security ourselves. We will be partners, and we'll live in peace." The Israelis rejected that. So it seems to me that Israel is deathly afraid of peace. They can't have it. They have to have war. I don't think a nation that's constituted in this way has a future. And, I always like to remind people, Henry Kissinger himself in 2012 said that 10 years from now, there will be no Israel anymore. So that would have said it in 2022. Okay, he got the timeline wrong, but he understood the dynamics in the region, and he understood that Israel, the Zionist project, is not sustainable, that it was going to fail. And maybe part of the reason why we are seeing this horrible security deterioration in the region is because Israel is desperate, because they themselves understand that they are failing, they are dying, and this is their dying agony that we're seeing now. I don't know how long it can go on for. These things don't happen overnight, but I think they have no future. And then, one thing I noted in one of the during this week, when the Iranians warned Israel that they were going to bomb their northern regions if Benjamin Netanyahu orders attack on Beirut, they also, part of the message was to the Palestinian people, it is now time to take your country back. So we have to take into account that there's always a possibility of an internal uprising.